Pleasure to be on stage with you guys, and thank you so much for being here. I have a number of specific questions for you individually and some general questions that I'll throw out there. But before we do that, at least for me, it would be interesting to know why it was important for each of you to be here today. What was interesting about this event that actually motivated you to get on the plane and be here with us today? So maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Isom, Chief Operating Officer of American, so thanks everybody for the time today. Our interest at American is we have 600,000 customers a day, right? 6,700 flights a day, and when you think about security, and when you think about relationship with the TSA and CBP and other government entities, it's incredibly important that we view those relationships and those checkpoints as part of the entire travel experience. And so we have incredible volume. We have a time issue that's important. We have a real estate issue at the airports that's of great interest. And we really want to make this a customer experience that meets the needs of the government entities that we deal with, as well as ultimately allowing us to provide our customers value for what they buy.
Maurice Jenkins, CIO of Miami International. I have the symbiotic relationship with Robert since he is my he's my 500-pound gorilla at my airport.
You're my landlord.
And I'm his landlord. And for the record, he does pay his rent. Yes. But if you look at where Miami is positioned in the global marketplace, then we have grown thanks to Robert and his co-chair partners, that we've grown, one of the very few airports that's actually grown on average of 3.6% per annum, even during the economic downturn, and we continue to grow, even though we're dealing with certain situations. So within that, we look at, as we grow, we also have a fundamental need as a fiduciary to ensure that we enhance and provide that passenger experience. On average, I think maybe a month ago, if you would have asked me how many passengers a day actually come through my airport, and I would have told you maybe 100, 105,000 a day. Within the last 2 weeks, we're averaging over 136,000. So ladies and gentlemen, we have that responsibility, and I call it from garage to gate. How do I move that many individuals per day through my airport safely and effectively to ensure airlines have on-time departures, to ensure TSA can move the passengers through security checkpoints in a timely manner to be able to get to the gate, and also ensure that level of spend. So we have various touch points across the whole value chain that need to be addressed, and how best do we go about doing it. So when we saw this, we figured, how best do I get to learn from some of you guys as to what's available out in the industry?
Great. Steve Bauscher, Managing General Partner at In-Q-Tel. We're an investment firm, 501c3 not-for-profit investment firm that gets money from various government agencies, including Department of Homeland Security, to identify interesting startup companies that have technologies that can be deployed in operational and production environments with the agencies we work with. Given our relationship with DHS and the various components, including TSA and Customs and Borders Patrol, this is obviously a big area of interest for us. We ask for a problem set from each of our customers when they give us money to invest, and certainly the topic for today is well covered within that problem set.
And I'm Roger Dow. I represent a group called the U.S. Travel Association. Our members are all the members of the travel industry, whether it come to hotels, rental cars, destinations, Disney, American Express, Expedia, et cetera. And we have one mission, and that's to get more people traveling to the United States and within the United States. And the reason I'm here is we see a pinch point, and it's getting through the airport of TSA and security, or getting through CBP, of the vastly growing numbers. And the numbers are staggering about our ability to handle future numbers. So if we don't figure out a totally different way, using smart technology, new processes to have secure people through the airport, but efficiently, the thing is just going to clog up and be hard to grow.
Fantastic. And that's a fantastic segue into my first question for all of you, and maybe we can start out with you, Roger. As you know, in 2014, there was a presidential memorandum stating and setting a goal for the nation to have over 100 million visitors visiting the U.S. and enabling that to take place in a much more efficient manner than it is today. So my question to all of you, and we'll start out with Roger, is what are you specifically doing in your roles and your organization to actually facilitate this goal? And specifically, what technologies do you see out there that you need to utilize to help the country reach this goal?
Okay, from our perspective, our group was actually behind the president setting that goal and setting the goal and national travel strategy. 5 years, let me put it in perspective. 5 years ago, 50 million people came into the United States from outside. Last year, 76 million. If we get to 100 million, which is the goal, I asked our folks, I said, just do me a favor, as our chief economist, tell me what it's going to mean for Miami, for LA, for JFK. And she came back, well, it's about 5,400 passengers, new passengers a day, 4,000 in Miami. And you start thinking of numbers like that on top of this. So we've got to find a way to have people with technology, whether it be facial recognition, whether it be databases talking, but we've got to find a way to be able to move these people safely and efficiently. Otherwise, we will not hit that goal. We just can't hit it. Yeah.
So I guess a follow-up question would be, one way to do it is to just add human capital, right? And that's costly, and they can only go so far. Biometrics obviously is going to play a huge role in this, identifying people, segmenting the high-risk people from the low-risk people, and so on. But with all the industry partners that you have in your organization, are there specific technologies you see that people are deploying to be able to process these passengers more efficiently?
Well, what has happened is when you look at CBP of doing automated passport control kiosks and all that, that's been very helpful. The global entry system, phenomenally helpful. The problem is there's not enough people in these programs, whether it be TSA PreCheck or global entry, and so that becomes a tremendous problem for getting people through an airport. And you talk about adding more people, the problem that these gentlemen have at the airport is there's no space. So you can't just throw another 30,000 people at it and expect it to work. It's where the space, and so it's adding more people is a little Band-Aid, but we've got to get far beyond more people. 100% agree. Steve?
Sure. So, the other gentlemen on the panel here are much more informed than I am on the economics of the presidential initiative. But from a technology perspective, the only way it's going to work is through a multi-layered approach. So, we're looking at and making investments in big data analytics on the front end. So even before someone arrives at the airport, what can you figure out about them? What can you know about them to help figure out which line, as was discussed earlier today, to send them through. At the point of entry, we're investing in biometric and other screening technologies to help try and make that flow point or choke point more efficient, more effective, and quicker for everybody. And then even after they're through the checkpoint, but while they're still at the airport, you want to continue to monitor what's going on. And so there are video analytic and behavioral analytic investments and technologies that we're looking at for that part of the ecosystem as well. But there is no one holy grail or silver bullet that will solve this problem. Instead, it's going to be, I think, the development and deployment of a multi-layered approach.
Well, there's no magic bullet, but if you go back and look based upon the order that's been established, we've done APC kiosks. I'm not sure where we rank within the U.S. in regards to that level of deployment, but we've set aside to put roughly about 144 of them in there. We've had some long queue lines that can run up to almost 2 hours. So you can imagine a 10-hour flight with a 2-hour wait. The passenger experience just diminished significantly. Since we've rolled them out, we've seen passenger processing coming out of the FIS and I get them daily. Roughly, the last one was 37 seconds, up to almost 8 minutes. So I think we've done exceptionally well in taking that level of the initiative going forward. So we've implemented APC. We do have global entry, and also with the mobile passport control kiosk. One of the good things about Miami, I'm not sure how some airports do it, and realize you do have some level of contention at times between federal agencies and airlines as well as airports, and that's a whole nother discussion. But when you look at the level of collaboration, when you do put that together and working to make that happen, you see some level of improvements in some areas, and you're actually tackling the issue. Because we're doing some other queue time wait initiatives inside of CBP that we'll be deploying pretty soon, and that level of collaboration, hopefully we'll see that level of increase. And the numbers, as you mentioned, as Roger mentioned before, as those numbers continue to grow, and this global market continues to grow, it could only get progressively worse if we don't go back and tackle it. Traditional brick and mortar is going to change. If you're landlocked, you can only grow but so much, but there's a lot that you have to contend with. Case in point, I was talking with my counterparts from Istanbul 3 days ago. They came to Atlanta, so we met, and they move almost 100 million people. Their goal is to move 200. This industry moves over 7.1 billion people, and that is projected to grow. How are we expected to go ahead and deliver on the end-to-end passenger experience if we can't deal with our day-to-day issues today of several million people, 500 million and growing, traversing through our system of airports, and being able to be prepared to deal with that level of growth? So we have APC, we have NPC, we have global entry. Are we looking at new initiatives? Yes. I put beacons in my airport. Can that help with passenger wayfinding? Just to help the process along for that passenger experience, to say, I don't mind that journey and my end destination, be it Miami, be it Dallas, be it LA, be it New York, be it Chicago. It's one that says I want to continue that travel, because those emerging markets are going to travel: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and let's not forget South Africa.
So the president's initiative is fantastic. I think it's been really important to getting us all here together to think about problems on a joint basis. If you think about our challenge right now, right? It's not just that the passengers are going to come, right? If we don't do something different, the passengers won't come, and that's going to be the big issue. Imagine coming into any one of our gateways within the U.S. and experiencing a 2-hour wait or a 60-minute wait, with customers' expectations today for instantaneous gratification, right? It's only going to get worse and worse, and yet we're locked where we've been. So I'm pleased with the initiatives that we've seen with kiosks. I'm pleased with the initiatives that we've seen with global entry. It seems that we still have so many points of duplicative of tasks that we have to get our arms around. And to that end, at least for me, it comes down to positive identification and how we deploy resources, technology to really establish that. And that's for payment, it's for travel, it's for security, it's for everything. And so, at least for me, the key right now is how we all come together and solve that issue of positive identification. And it's biometrics, but what aspect of biometrics? There's a bunch that satisfy some and don't satisfy others. It's better use of technology and ultimately using data that we can collect in a number of different resources. But there's a lot of work to be done here, and I can't pick on just any one of the technologies or the areas other than ultimately identification and positive identification of passengers.
Excellent. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So maybe we start with you on this one, Robert. When I go through the airports or get on the planes, it always feels like, I'm guilty until proven innocent. Let's put it that way. Most passengers are treated equally the same, with a few exceptions, with the TSA pre and global entry. But it seems like the approach is that treat everybody the same, put them through the same screening process, and hopefully catch the bad guys in the process. So my question to you guys is there any initiatives taking place today where you guys actually end up segmenting the good guys from the bad and putting them through a different screening process when they're traveling?
Well, I think that's probably a question for John and Kevin and some others that have been up here earlier. At the end of the day, we want to facilitate that process of getting customers into the secure side of the airport to where they can go. We think that we can be helpful in identifying with information that we have and that we have shared in the past, and we'll continue to share about risks and customers as it comes about. But one of the things I'd like to note here is that we spend a lot of time figuring out how to do segmentation, right? And it's to a certain degree, there's a guilty till proven innocent, or I get a better quality of service around security, for certain, in certain regards. And I think we've got to find a way to make the whole security aspect of things, much more passive. And that's where technology comes in, I think. It's through using information that we have, right, that we can analyze. It's through positive identification, and then it's also through technology. Not just information technology, but it's through using different means of screening, okay, and different approaches of scanning passengers and baggage. that I think can really streamline the overall process and ultimately take the, I'm, better or worse, for security. At the end of the day, that should be something I think that we can make much more equal for folks.
Maurice?
Never buy a one-way ticket and don't check any bags. You will get you will get selected for secondary screening so quickly it'll make your head spin. Trust me on that. Been there. It's in essence for us. We haven't done much, but I look at it as being a visionary for my airport and looking where airlines are going. And for me, the level of expectation, yes, you're looking for that seamless level of movement throughout your airport. And you have these levels of security checkpoints and you have ticket counters. To me, at some point in time, as you think about all this, I think ticket counters are probably going to go away. I think you're going to have more agents facing the passenger, being able to check that passenger in and being able to generate that boarding pass as well as that bag tag. But at the same token, while you're doing that level of engagement, why can't we have some level of technology sitting out there to capture biometrics of some sort, actually do some level of due diligence in screening that passenger before they get to the checkpoint? And maybe that should be the checkpoint. Given the fact of the footprint of your airport may change, or it probably will change, how do you go about tackling all of that? And to me, the synergies need to be between, you're gathering airline data, well, airlines are actually gathering some level of passenger data, but from a domestic flight, you're probably not going to get too much. But at the same token, with the data that you've gathered and whatever else is going on within your airport with some level of video analytics and other data capturing devices and being able to probably trace test bags before they go through security checkpoint, what else is sitting out there that can actually be done to facilitate that movement? Because at the end of the day, you want that seamless movement, you want that seamless process, but at the same token, the passengers want that level of engagement, so you have to be able to communicate to them as well. So there's that level of expectation. So I'm looking at, when I talk to individuals such as yourselves, it's what's sitting out there. We all have pain points, yes, but this is what an airport footprint looks like, and these are some of the challenges that we're dealing with. What's sitting out there that you can actually start tackling and looking at some of this and integrating it into your business process.
So as a user, I'm a TSA pre and global entry subscriber customer. I'm not sure what the right term is, but I'm a huge fan. It's changed my life. I encourage everyone to sign up for it if they haven't. It's one of these things that once you do, you ask yourself why you didn't do it 3 years ago. That gets some very basic level of segmentation that I think you're talking about. But to get to the vision that I think you created, you are going to need biometrics. And you're going to need biometrics at distance, and you're going to need biometrics at speed. And I think those are the two sort of thematic areas of technology that we need to see improvement in before we can get to sort of the utopian vision that you described there.
And I think one of the things is when people hit pain or pinch points, they find another way of going there, whether it be another airport or don't travel. When TSA's numbers went up in July so high in Chicago, we did some quick research with about 5,000 people, and 20% said, I may not go to the airport. And the cost of that to the airlines, but to our economy, it's the trip that someone would have come here to make a deal is now a phone call. And when that becomes a phone call, the deal probably doesn't happen. So the risk to the economy, I think, is monstrous. I do think Homeland Security did a great job about 5 years ago of replacing the I-94 form. You remember the form we used to look for on your landing, and you don't know where it is, and you don't know the flight number, and you don't have a pen. But they've now got an advanced look. So they've taken it. So now anyone's coming here from come from visa waiver country, they basically know who they are 72 hours, a week in advance. And that's the more we can put security. It's door to door. It's from the minute they make a reservation, this process has to start. And from when they get out of the airport, because people look at the whole trip door to door. How quickly can I get to the airport, through security, delayed flights, all these things. And so it's a bigger thing than just that pinch point of where CBP and TSA is. It's the whole experience that the airlines are doing a great job on improving technology, but also almost individually. And it's you wish you could see a holistic solution, but each one wants to use it as a benefit to get more people to fly on American or Delta or whatever. Yeah.
Fantastic. I had a question for you, Roger. When we spoke on Friday, you mentioned, one identity or biometric technology could facilitate a better experience for any passenger when they're going through the airports or getting on a plane or getting off a plane. And you mentioned that it doesn't just have to stop at the airport. You know, having this one identity on an individual passenger can help them getting a rental car, can help them check into a hotel room, and enhances the overall passenger or traveler experience. And you mentioned that has a direct impact on our economy. When you can provide a more seamless experience for visitors to US, it has a direct impact on our economy. So I was hoping you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. So why shouldn't my global entry card or number or whatever allow me to enter a hotel? Why shouldn't I be able to walk up to a Hertz counter and put that in? They know exactly who I am. They got all the data together. Why shouldn't I be able to go into the Super Bowl or an NFL event or a baseball game with that? So I think we have to look even beyond. I said we have to look at the whole trip, but I think we have to look beyond that to all the other elements of travel and life. I mean, we're going to hit a point right very soon that you're going to be told by the NBA and NFL that you're going to have some form of identification to get into a game, and it's going to be really a big problem if that hits. You just take the airports and what happens there, but put 15, 20,000 people trying to get somewhere for 8 o'clock start of a game. You got a real problem.
Maurice, this one is for you. You know, the airport environment is a very complex one. Most of us just go through the security checkpoint, maybe grab a meal, go do a little shopping, get on the plane, and get on our way. But there's so many different players within an airport environment. You got the airlines, you got the government agencies, you got the retailers, and it becomes a balancing act, which I would think makes it a little bit harder to be innovative in an airport environment when you got so many different players with different priorities. So in your daily role, how do you balance those priorities and make everybody happy? And at the same time, come up with innovation?
A lot of Tums, sleepless nights. It's a combination thereof. I mean, I've been doing this for a good while now. We're one of the very few airports. We have over 100 airlines, so you can imagine my stakeholder base is significantly large. But what we look at is having the opportunity to sit with our existing stakeholders and looking at what some of their issues are and how do we actually work towards it. So we look at the airlines first initially. They want to make sure that that seamless movement of those passengers to be able to check in, get through security checkpoint, and be able to board their aircraft. But at the same token, make sure the concessions are available. Do we have ample time for them to spend monies to be able to increase our non-aeronautical revenue? Because the price points for airports are the more non-aeronautical revenue you generate, the more we get to work on reducing an airline's operating costs, which means Robert likes me a lot more and he can increase his flights out of my airport, and we get along a whole lot better. But the whole value chain says we need to ensure that I have effective parking systems. I need to ensure that I have effective common use systems or whatever the carriers are using at their ticket counters. I need to ensure that I can have a seamless level of passenger movement throughout my facility for them to have that level of comfort and feel. I did it with a mobile app and existing Wi-Fi and beacons and some other things. But in looking at that, it's looking what all the existing stakeholder pain points are and how can I best help you facilitate to get there, because it's a win-win. If we all don't work together towards making this happen, the success factor is limited. So from a revenue generation standpoint, it's working with the concessionaires and what their expectations are, looking at some of the carrier expectations on what their needs are, and look at what some of the federal regulations coming down on top of that we get notified that we need to work with them to deal with. And it's a lot to absorb, but it's not cut and dry. And those of you that think you could sit in Robert's shoes, my shoes, and anyone else up here, I challenge you to take that on, because I had hair at one point in time in my life, and this gray beard wasn't actually gray initially. So, but it is challenging. There's a lot more to look forward to. So I expect to see a lot coming out of the industry for what the demands are and what the needs are and what you guys are going to look to bring to the marketplace.
Great. This one is actually for Robert and Maurice. In our daily lives at Plug and Play, one of the biggest challenges that startups have is getting their foot in the door to do a deal with someone like American Airlines or Miami International. And it just seems like corporations are not really set up to work with startups. Typically, a lot of the innovation ends up dying because they cannot get a commercial deal done with a bigger company or a bigger organization like yours, Maurice. So my question to you is, what advice would you have to startups? If it's a biometric company or one identity technology that's trying to do business with your organizations and your company, what do they have to do to basically get noticed? I mean, obviously, Plug and Play has programs that make those introductions happen, but we're not doing it for everybody. So what advice do you guys have, and what are you doing internally to actually have the startups' voices heard within your organizations and company?
Well, I can start, Maurice. I think the big thing you have to realize is that for airlines and airports, these are huge transaction volume entities, okay? And whether it's the travel experience itself, the flights, okay, or security screening, your acceptability for failure is nil. It's zero. There's no such thing as a 99.9% acceptability rate with airlines, and when it comes terms to safety, security, you just can't do it. So one of the issues I think we run into with startups is there's a little bit of a naive approach that, hey, I've got something, right, that I can just go ahead and deploy. And you know what? It may work, but does it work on millions of customers a day? And is it foolproof? Because if it's not, right, we can't even touch it. And that's why you see, whether it's how we build aircraft, whether it's how our reservation systems are built, whether it's how we interact with TSA and CBP. There's so many tools that have to be built off of, right, to ensure that integrity, that reliability is never compromised. And I think that that's something that is a little bit foreign to startups. We don't have a tolerance for failure.
I'll echo to what Robert said. It's that 5.9 uptime, while it sounds great in traditional industry, normally for us, it's a hard sell because there's a level of expectation that goes along with it. So if I were to go ahead and engage with a startup and I implemented that system within any of my aviation common use or any of my aviation systems, and there was a failure or a hiccup, that failure or that hiccup comes at a cost. If that costs the airlines money, they're going to come back to me because they need to be compensated for that hiccup. And that cost could be significantly high. So recommendation-wise would be one of two things. There are not that many players within our aviation space, considering the fact that it is tight-knit, yes. However, our expectation, what we look for deliverables, I would say look to engage with the players that are sitting out there in the industry, because we have a forum. For me, I used to chair the bid committee for ACI, and Matt's here from ACI. You can actually say, well, why don't we get with ACI, which is Airports Council International, when we bring that to market to them. We have a business information technology committee that we meet, I think 3 times a year, Matt, and we have that discussion of what's going out there from an innovation standpoint that we can actually tie into an airport, and can we actually truly evaluate that and then work towards implementing it into the aviation space or into my airport. To give you an idea, my maintenance window, traditionally environments, maintenance windows are what, 5, 6, 7 hours maybe? My maintenance window at my airport is 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. That's all I have.
Unless there's bad weather.
Unless there's bad weather, that gets concatenated down to 2. All right, maybe 1. So the only time I could do anything, any upgrades, any system maintenance, anything to my airports from 1 a.m. to 4. So I have a very tight-knit window in regards to make sure that my carriers maintain that level of uptime. So startups, strongly encouraged. Let's do from the ACI standpoint, which we deal with airports. Bring that to the forefront, and let's look at that level of collaboration with the entities sitting out there that do the A&E work, that do the app dev work, that implement the hardware work, and see how you can best layer that, because they have think tanks as well. They have labs as well, that they do all beta tests, sign off with all the carriers before we deploy. So if you want to get your product in, then this is a great opportunity to actually look at that, because when we spend millions, we don't spend thousands, because it affects the entire supply chain for the airport. For the record, he didn't know who I was when we met a little while ago.
He does now.
Thank you.
Robert, this one is for you. You guys had a press release on July 5th that you started a collaboration with TSA to bring down passengers' wait times and also increase efficiency for passenger processing.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that and what your experience has been working with TSA and what the ultimate objective is?
Well, this is I've got to tell you, a fantastic success story. If you take a look at where, really, we all stood as an aviation industry just, 6-9 months ago, we were looking at, a crisis for the summer. And that was largely, look, there was, increased volumes of passengers, there are different standards in terms of screening, there were shortages in terms of employees at checkpoints, and we were really experiencing wait times that were, as we've talked, making travel, really unenjoyable. But since that time, I've got to tell you, the TSA, through a lot of initiative, pulling up the boots, they have embraced and gone out and found technology solutions. They've gone out and they've been creative with staffing and financing. And you take a look at it, they've been very, very aggressive and ingenious in terms of getting the problem under control. So what I look at right now is, are we perfect? No. And can we streamline? And do we need much more? Yes. But have we gotten back to being able to handle the volumes that we have today and offer a service that's acceptable? The answer is yes. So I was just in DC, I think it was last week, and visited with Gary Rascott, the COO of the TSA. And he took me through their control center, right? Which I think is actually a fairly new development in terms of the TSA in their view of how things have to be managed. I think there's been a change in attitude or a change of approach of, look, we just have to get through a certain screening process to let's take a look at the process, make sure we're doing what's right, and ultimately facilitating the movement of passengers, but also making sure they're even more secure and safe than they've ever been. And I can tell you the kind of metrics that they look at, the kind of immediate concern for issues throughout the system, the expectation of systems uptime, it's all front and center with everybody watching it as if it's the control center for American Airlines. And so I'm really pleased with what's going on there. And that is spawning a lot of consideration of borrowing ideas from other industries, to taking a look at the experience over a long term and trying to make it considerably better, and also working with the other government entities such as CBP to really share and try to figure out how to tackle the problem. Yeah.
Amir, can I chime in real quick?
Please.
Another item, and I applaud TSA on this as well. I'm doing a test at one of the checkpoints in Miami in regards to wait times within the TSA checkpoint. And I'm almost complete now with a tender to go out to do so. So we've integrated some video analytics as well as Bluetooth and the beacons I've put in the airport, Wi-Fi, et cetera, to actually looking at that data, be able to do some good analysis in regards to true wait times within the security checkpoints. And CBP has been instrumental in reviewing that, looking at how we gauge the entry points as well as the actual time itself, and looking at from the time that the checkpoint opened throughout the course of the day, what the average wait time has been, and they've been very supportive in that. So that will be going out to bid shortly, but we're actually looking at whatever level of technology is actually sitting out there to actually work with law enforcement, with TSA, with the airport, to be able to present that back to the traveling public for all of our checkpoints in the airport, what the wait times are. So within that, you can make that decision in regards to, do I want to get in line? Do I want to shop? Do I want to go to another checkpoint? What is it do I want to do? So now you get to control your journey. And the intent is, if you're controlling your journey, that level of experience resides with you. So therefore, you can't say, well, that airline did this to me, or this airport was too slow, or TSA checkpoint lines were too long. You yourself, the passenger, you get to gauge and govern yourself. And within that, hopefully, there's one more layer to add to the experience side of the house. So when that comes out, I look forward to seeing what some of you guys are actually bringing to the marketplace.
Fantastic. One more question for you two, and then we'll move to this side of the panel. The Delta outage that happened not too long ago and caused, I don't know, hundreds of flights to be canceled and delayed. And from what I read in the news, it was a power outage of some sort, and you would think in today's age, a power outage wouldn't actually end up affecting hundreds of flights. So I guess my question to both of you is, are we really that vulnerable, due to a power outage that, an entire company's computer system can go down and it could essentially impact thousands of flyers? And if we are that vulnerable, what is being done about it?
You want to take this?
So, yeah, no, I'm not going to take it. But no, I can't speak to any company's situations or issues. But I can tell you that we have to. When you think of how complex and how tightly integrated, right, aviation is, whether it's from a security perspective to just daily flights, there are so many contingencies, redundancies, and really risk assessments that have to be done. We're constantly on the lookout, and I know at American Airlines, whether it's computer systems, whether it's power, whether it's gate availability, you name it. The redundancies have to be built into the system, and we have to make considerations for issues that will come up. Variables happen every day. No day operating in the airline is the same. So I can tell you that the one thing that is incredibly important is making sure that we risk assess every area and make sure that we have contingency plans and redundancy measures for just about every aspect of the business.
Everybody remembers Y2K, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's how best do you go about mitigating your level of risk? It's what you do as an organization that you need to do. I can't speak on behalf of Delta or Delta Technologies or whatever it was where the outage actually occurred, but if you look at any airport, any airline, any business entity, you need to figure out how best you want to go about mitigating risks. If you're in an existing older structure, another newer facility, and you're running legacy systems and a combination thereof, do you have an exposure level to risk? The answer is yes, and not even necessarily from a power perspective. So how best do you mitigate that? Do you deal with it? It's what needs to be in your cooperative, your COOP plan. Hopefully you have one and the entities out there to actually develop and design them for you. But how do you recover? So you're always gauging on how well you stay up is how well you recover, right? So you're only as good as your last performance. So you look back and say, well, yeah, I'm up 99.9% of the time, but that one time that you're down, it's all of a sudden you're the worst thing that was ever created. But at the same token is, how well do you recover and how well do you keep your passengers informed and how well do I get back to where I last left off? And I think that's the key question you need to ask. Will I be down for weeks, months, or days, or hours? And then I think you're going to be gauged and benchmarked against that. Power and the grid is some things that you can't control. Who would have predicted New York having power outage back in the days when New York went out? You're going to ask, is any city prepared? How well is Con Ed or any other power entity? So it truly all depends on a lot of other factors that I think are outside of the airline's control.
Great. Steve, this one is for you. It's more of a personal question.
Go ahead, Steve.
You used to be in the private sector venture capital business a while back, and you decided to join In-Q-Tel. So just wondering what was the motivation behind that, and then if you can also elaborate what In-Q-Tel's investment philosophy is and what it is that you guys are trying to achieve. But
Sure.
First start with a personal question.
Okay. So I grew up in Washington, D.C. with my dad working 25 years in the private sector and 20 years for the federal government. And growing up, I sort of always thought I would do a little bit of both, and I ended up here in California in 1992, a little bit by fluke. But I decided to stay because it's hard to beat this area. But I worked, as you said, for startup companies for 5 years, and then as a partner at a traditional venture capital firm for 8 years. And then the In-Q-Tel opportunity came up, and it was an opportunity in my mind to bring together both worlds, both parts of my life, I guess. So what I loved about venture capital was the stimulation of meeting entrepreneurs, thinking about their ideas, getting my head around their technology, their markets, their opportunities. And now I get to do that at In-Q-Tel, but combine that with the stimulation of meeting intelligence officers from the CIA, senior folks from DHS and NSA, and hearing about their missions and trying to understand their challenges, and then bringing those two worlds together to find the right technology to solve the problems. And so I think I got the greatest job in the world. I get excited to get out of bed every morning, come to work, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world.
Are you able to move fast enough within the
Yeah.
government organization and be competitive with the
Great.
venture capital community?
So the second part of your question that I didn't answer was, what does In-Q-Tel do? So In-Q-Tel, as I said, is an independent not-for-profit. We get money from 9 different government agencies. We were originally created by CIA, but now work with CIA, NSA, DOD, DHS, FBI, several others, to really bridge the gap between their technical challenges and the innovation occurring in the 10,000 plus venture-backed startup companies here in the United States. The acknowledgement of CIA when they created us was that innovation has shifted from places like Xerox PARC and Bell Labs to these 10,000 plus startup companies. And to one of your earlier questions, the government wasn't really set up to do business with startup companies, mainly because these startup companies get funded on 12 to 18-month cycles in which they have to demonstrate tangible progress to their investors in order to raise the next round of financing. And if they're dealing with a customer that's not going to make a decision in 12 to 18 months, they're not going to be able to demonstrate any progress. And that's often why those companies ignore the government as a market. In-Q-Tel was created to identify these companies, be able to fund not just an investment in the company, but also fund the piloting of those technologies with these agencies. So we actually pay for the cost of the pilot. And then if the pilot goes well, the end agency will buy directly from the portfolio company more stuff, more licenses, more appliances, more widgets. And we call that an adoption. And we measure ourselves first and foremost in the number of pilots and the number of adoptions we generate, as well as the qualitative impact. So we feel like, to your last question, through that model, we are able to move quickly enough. So we do about 30 transactions a year. About 75% of those will successfully pilot, and about 50% of them will actually end up being adopted by the agencies we work with. So we have numerous examples of companies such as FireEye in the cybersecurity space, or Google Earth in the satellite imagery space that we identified before they'd ever done any business with the government. They, in fact, had thought about the government as market and decided it wasn't an appropriate market for them, and through our relationship with them, ended up being a significant vertical market to those companies.
Fantastic. And I know a lot of your investments, or some of your investments, I should say, are about monitoring human behavior across various digital channels. And, again, going back to the biometric topic at hand, are any of these technologies being utilized to kind of identify the non-risk people who are travelers across the world instead of just trying to identify the high-risk individuals?
Right. I'm not sure if any of them are being used today in that manner. Certainly, as I said before, I think, in order to get to the utopia that people are describing here today in various speeches, you need a multi-layer approach. And part of the approach is, once I make that flight reservation, what do I know about Steve Bauscher? What's his threat level? What's his background? By the way, is Steve Bauscher the same person as Stephen Bauscher? Is the same person as Stephen C. Bauscher? There's a whole sort of big data challenges and opportunities available to these agencies once they know that I'm going to be flying on American Airlines in 2 weeks. So certainly that's an element of our investment strategy that's appropriate for this problem set. At the same time, as we talked about, there are biometric and screening technology improvements coming that can help at the point of entry or the point of departure to help screen who I am. And there are video analytics and other technologies to help monitor the airport after I'm through the security checkpoint, but before I get on the plane. So I think in order to get to where we all want to go, you're going to have to deploy a series and a set of layers, just like you are in the cybersecurity world. You're headed to more of a layered approach to security than sort of a one perimeter wall, we'll keep all the bad guys out approach.
Fantastic. Roger, last question for you,
Yep.
and this one is close to my heart. The reason we decided to focus on travel and hospitality at Plug and Play was because we truly felt like there hasn't been much disruption or innovation taking place in the industry for the past 20 years. We've seen incremental innovation, but we haven't seen disruptive technologies being created, whether it's by startups or by major corporations. So with the people you're in touch with, with all the hotel chains and various service providers in the travel industry, how much does innovation play a role in their daily objectives or their quarterly objectives? Is it top of mind? Is it something they just talk about because it's a sexy thing to talk about? Is it truly something that's part of their inner business processes?
Yeah. Well, I think all the major companies are all working to figure out how can we get innovative ourselves, but you do have a conundrum of the legacy people that have been there who are protecting systems that they've built and so not as open to other systems coming along. We as an industry have not done very well. The disruptors, and left it wide open for disruptors. You look at Airbnb, I mean, gee, they came in and overnight, $17 billion worth of, you look at Uber, Lyft, those things, the OTAs. The OTAs have basically taken the distribution of the lodging companies and own it. And the lodging companies are very frustrated with that because it's a very highly cost. I think we've got as a nation and an industry look at this. I applaud both Delta and American. They jumped in on this TSA thing and did some very innovative things. They spent millions of dollars, not because they're nice guys, because something out of their control was going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars if they didn't jump in. And we have a very good relationship with Kevin and with everybody, John, with Pete Neffinger, you saw earlier, Ali Mayorkas, very good relationship. But they're hampered by things not being a crisis, not having enough money, not having enough resources, a procurement process that makes it near to impossible for anyone to do business with them. So you do all those things, and I think what we've got to do as a country, we've got to say, hey, this is just as serious as Ebola, this is just as serious as Zika virus, or those things get $7 billion worth of government spending, and these guys are trying to cobble together a few dollars. But we've got to get very serious about this, because our economics cannot stand up unless we build this. I'll give you one example. I was with Pete Neffinger having a drink one night talking about this, and I said, Pete, and they're trying so darn hard with the resources they have, but I said, when I had a lady in my organization try and get TSA PreCheck just to see what it would take, and it was 55 days to get her interview. But if she could travel 60 miles, then she could do it in 32 days, and it had to be 10 a.m. on October the 4th, not on October the 5th or 6th or whatever. And I said to Pete, if you had a house to sell me, and I wanted to buy it, and I wanted to buy $400 grand, I'd dial Quicken Loans, Rocket Loans, hey, it's Roger. Here's my Social Security number. I want to borrow $400 grand. I'm going to buy a $600 grand house. Approved, thank you very much. And I said, we've got to get to that kind of a situation, and we've got to embrace technologies to do this. We cannot just keep putting Band-Aids on, having Delta and American fix the flow and try and get new bins and things like that. We've really got to make this a national priority, and I don't think that's there yet.
Fantastic. Can I get a round of applause for the panelists?